Okay, it's a beautiful Tuesday, last Tuesday in, no, is it the last Tuesday in June? Where is it? First Tuesday in June. First, yes. Easily confused the older I get. First Tuesday in June. And it's good to be with you. So let's start with our first question. Here's a woman who says, my husband wants to loan money to his cousin. I don't think we can afford it, but he says we should just do it because it's the charitable thing to do. He says that I'm faithless and that we're not being Christian, but we have debt, and I think we have debt, and we have our own children who also need money. I love it when people imply that if you don't do what they want, that you're also not doing what God wants, don't you? There are a number of ways to handle this, but and I'm not suggesting that you particularly quote this to your husband, but in addition to being loving, which is, of course, suggested in the Christian way of living, we're also supposed to be wise. There's a place in the book of Luke that says if you're going to build a tower, before you build the tower, you sit down first and you count the cost before you do that to make sure that you have enough to build the tower. Because if you don't, then after you've laid the foundation, you may not be able to finish it. And then everybody's going to laugh at you, saying, what a fool, you built the foundation and you couldn't finish the tower. So there's a lot to be said for wisdom. And you got to be sure you got it to give before you dole it out to others, especially, giving it to your own family first. So sure, we need to be loving, but got to be smart too. Otherwise, we'd give away everything that we had, wouldn't we? Sell your house, give away your car, your money, and then you wouldn't have a thing. And I don't think that's really implied in being charitable. And the two of you are in a partnership. And in a true partnership, no one person would lovingly make decisions that would go against the will of the other, especially frighten the other. So it would be unloving on your husband's part to say, well, we're going to go ahead and loan money to the cousin over your objections. And his allegiance would be to you before it would be to the cousin. And if he's looking for some sort of Christian justification, there's plenty of that in the Bible, that his first allegiance is to his wife. So, I would suggest telling him that he might be right. He might be right that it would be a loving thing to do. And that's what I would suggest. That, giving money to the cousin would be a loving thing, but it may not be the best loving thing. And that the highest priority loving thing at this point is for the two of you to function as a partnership. And that at this point, whether your reasons are flawless is really not all that important, but that at this point, it's not a decision that you're ready to make. And would he be willing to support you while at this point you're not ready to do that? And not criticize you in the process. The two of you are, working together. And, criticizing and mocking one partner who's performing differently than another isn't helpful. So you don't need to beat yourself up about it either. You don't need to wonder whether you're somehow a bad person or a bad Christian just because you're not willing to give out money to somebody for the reasons that we've already stated. The next viewer says, in discussions with two other friends about real love. Similar statements have been made by them. One of them said, I think I would cheapen the love for my wife or my kids if I would say that I love everyone the same way I love them. And it isn't true. Another one said, I don't and can't love others the way I love my wife. Well, in the first place, there's nowhere in real love that says that we should love everybody the same. That's really never been implied, but I think kind of probably where that comes from is that if we love everybody unconditionally, that if it's truly without conditions, I suppose it could be inferred from that if it's without conditions, that we could end up loving everybody the same. That would be an odd inference, but it could be. So it really comes down to a question of, if you love everybody unconditionally, could you still love certain people more? Wouldn't that kind of imply that there would be then some conditions for loving those certain people more? That's a pretty good question. So let's talk more about the word love, because that's really the problem. When people say, I love my wife more, the problem is that the word love is muddied up with multiple connotations. There's real confusion about it. When somebody says, oh, I love my boyfriend, well, there are multiple things going on there. They're not just saying, I unconditionally care about my boyfriend's happiness. They're also saying, I enjoy how I feel when I'm with my boyfriend. And so you got to separate that out before you can understand how you can love one person more than another person. There are two kind of separate things going on with loving, and we need to talk about both of them. The first is that unconditional love is really a choice. It's an action. Real love is caring about the happiness of another person without wanting anything for ourselves in return. And we can do that with anybody. We can eventually, the better we get at it, unconditionally love pretty much everybody. But can you do that more with some people than with other people? Yeah, you can. You can actually unconditionally love one person more than another person. And how would that happen? Well, for example, my relationship with my wife, Donna. Do I love her the same as everybody else? I don't. For example, I made a commitment that I would love her first, that my priority would be to her first. When she asks for my time, effort, concern, devotion, I give it to her before I give it to anybody else. And I could give her my time, effort, concern, and so on without any conditions, and yet I would give it to her first. So I would unconditionally love her more than I would you, more than the mailman, more than the next door neighbor. Both would get unconditional love from me, Donna and the neighbor, and yet I would give it to her with a higher priority. So I would unconditionally love her more. It would be more from another sense also, in that the more that we love someone, the more connected we feel to them. And you'll see this with almost anybody who renders acts of service to another person. People go on service missions, for example. People render service to the downtown soup kitchen, any number of scenarios. The more that you render unconditional service to people, you find yourself more bound or connected to that person. The more you do it, the more you care about them. So love begets love. Love leads to more love. So the more I care about somebody, the more connected I feel to them, and the more I want to care about them. So The more I care about a person, the more I care about Donna, the more I want to. And so it tends to lead to more of it. And so you do tend to unconditionally care more about somebody the more time and effort you spend with them. So again, can you unconditionally care more about one person than another? Yeah, from multiple ways that we've already talked about. So that's unconditional love as an action or as a decision, as something that we do. Unconditional loving is something we do. Now, the more we do that, the more that we love somebody, because loving is the most powerful force in the universe. It is the primal creative force there is. The more we do that, the more we find ourselves in harmony with all that is good, all that is right, all that is true. The more that we do that, the happier we feel. So, the more I am unconditionally loving toward anyone, the happier I feel. Period. But the happier I also feel with them. So, if I am more unconditionally loving toward Donna, for example, then I would tend to be happier with her. So, in that sense, my happiness with her is kind of conditional, meaning the more loving I am, the happier I am. And then kind of thrown in there is kind of a little bit of a confusing factor, and that is the more loving toward me she is, the happier I am too. So that gets a little confusing. But where it really gets confusing is that when people say, oh, I really love Susie, I really love Bob, what they're almost invariably describing is not their unconditional love. They're describing their happiness. And actually, even more confusing, what they're usually describing is their enjoyment, their temporary pleasure, which is usually related to imitation love. So that makes it even more crazily confusing. But within the bounds of unconditional love, can I unconditionally love the special people in my life more? Sure, because I spend more time with them, unconditionally loving them, and because the more I unconditionally love them, the more joy I get from it. So, no, the idea of unconditional love doesn't dilute the special relationships that I have with people, or I believe the word that you used was cheapen the special relationships. Oh, by no means. In fact, the more unconditionally loving I am, the richer it makes my special relationships, while at the same time, I'm loving other people unconditionally. In fact, the more people I love unconditionally, the more I'm able to bring that back to those special relationships. It doesn't cheapen them at all. Here's a viewer who says, I'm learning about real love, and I'm finding it easier to love a lot of people, but I'm finding it, this is kind of almost the opposite of what we were just talking about. I'm finding it harder to love my wife. I still have enormous expectations of her and the choices she makes. However, I'm committed to doing the things that will allow me to be in a loving relationship with her. Well, your honesty is just wonderful, because what most people say in a relationship with their partner is, we're having all this difficulty. People come in to see me, and a couple, and they say, we're having all these fights, we're having all these difficulties, but we love each other. And that's usually not the case. It would be more honest to say, we're having all of these difficulties in our relationship because we don't love each other. We don't know how to love each other. Now, we want to, we mean to, every once in a while we do. We want to learn how. That would be more accurate to say, that we want to learn how to love each other. We're trying to. And that would explain all the difficulties. in their relationship. Now suddenly everything makes sense. And that's what drives people crazy. The reason that we have difficulty loving the people closest to us is that we have the highest expectations of them. Our expectations are up here, their performance is down here, and that makes us just insane. And then, of course, the other thing that bothers us is that because our expectations are up here and their performance is down here, the wounds that we feel from them are enormous. And so we carry around these wounds, these high expectations, the disappointment, the anger, just makes us crazy. So as we learn how to better unconditionally love our partners, well, then it's possible to start to heal these wounds. And as we learn to feel loved from other sources, and then we learn how to better love them, and bit by bit the healing happens. But, it's mostly about us learning to be more loving. And then eventually we're able to eliminate the huge expectations we have of our partners, which were always, insanely exaggerated anyway, and quit expecting them to make up for all the love that we didn't have. And as we learn to love, then we don't have this craziness in our life of these constantly unfilled expectations. Here's somebody who says, I've been married for 9 years. And I knew my husband for 5 years before that. We have a wonderful 4-year-old son. I don't believe my husband is cheating on me, but for the entire 14 years that I've known him, he seems to need the attention and approval of every female on the planet. For example, before the last company Christmas party, he was asked to learn how to swing dance and then be part of the entertainment, like Dancing with the Stars at the party. None of the married men would agree to do this, but my husband jumped at the opportunity. So he had to practice with the instructor, a married woman, at a dance studio. What's the big deal, right? And I came with him to several of his rehearsals, but there were some that I could not attend. And on the night of the Christmas party, he danced with this woman in the competition, and he and his partner won. That evening, after the competition, he danced with every available woman in the place except me. I sat by myself at the table feeling like a fool for a long time, and people looked at me, and I could tell they felt sorry for me, and I was embarrassed. And then I got up and started to dance on my own, and he still didn't dance with me until the very end. So what's going on with this guy? From the information you're giving me, which, you can never tell whether it's complete, he's just really enjoying this bath of imitation love that he gets from these women. And the reason that he's enjoying it from them is that they're new sources of imitation love. Why doesn't he enjoy the same imitation love from you? Because here he's dancing with all these other women and not you, and that's because you're an old source of imitation love. That's why men have affairs. He's already milked you for what he can get from you. Given any source of imitation love, people will take a new one over an old one. We get used to any source of imitation love. Guy has sex with a woman for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year maybe, and the excitement wears off. And then he starts looking around for somebody new to have it with. Well, the sex is pretty much the same, but it's a new person. And so for a while, it seems like it's an entirely different experience for him. And this is true with almost any source of imitation love, be it flattery or power or whatever. And so that's what he's doing with these women. It's not nearly as interesting from an old source as a new. It's not conscious on his part. And my guess is that you tend to think that it is conscious on his part. You continue, I confronted him about his behavior that same night, and he made me feel bad for bringing it up. He made me feel like I was just not happy that he had fun. So see, here you are, you're having completely different conversations. You're saying to him, why didn't you care about me? This is the night of the party. And he's saying, well, I was having fun. Why didn't you care about me? Here are two empty people who are drowning and gasping for air, both screaming, why don't you care about me? Or why don't you rescue me? Or how come you don't see that I'm drowning? Two drowning people cannot help each other. Neither of you seeing the other. Later the next week, you continue, he told me that he was looking at pictures from the party and he noticed that he was with everyone but me. He apologized and I was relieved. Actually, I'm surprised that he noticed that. Most people wouldn't. So he noticed it technically, but he was still not capable of actually caring about you. And I'm just guessing that before you continue in your email. Finally, we were making progress, I thought. Now, I must explain that although we have a child and we've been together for a while, I have not let myself go. I take good care of myself. His friends say, your wife is so beautiful, and that he married up. But that doesn't make him change his behavior. To be honest, I just want him to love and cherish me, which is what pretty much everybody wants. They want to be unconditionally loved, which is what you're describing by love and cherish. I just love him, but even today he hurt my feelings again. He invited me to a company function and then kept leaving me to go and run errands, answer a phone call or a text message, and in general, I just really felt alone. So see, again, he's running after all of these forms of imitation love, people's approval, power, whatever. One of his bosses even made a comment about it, and I was embarrassed. Our son graduated from preschool this week, and my husband wouldn't even sit with me during the ceremony. Instead, he invited a female co-worker who sat with me at the graduation, a woman who calls herself his work wife, while he refers to her affectionately as Trouble. So you said that he wasn't cheating on you, but when men have cute little pet names for women at work and they invite them to your son's preschool graduation, that's a troublesome sign, sweetie. Guys don't just invite random women from work to their son's preschool graduations and have cute little pet names for just co-workers who are women. This isn't normal. And that doesn't mean he's having an affair, but it does mean he has a profound need for people's approval. And when this is with women, this really tends to lead to problems. I told him that I felt disrespected by this. Yeah, that he would invite another woman to this event, and he ignored me. Now, that's even more problem. That's more worrisome than almost anything when you're trying to describe how you feel to your husband and he ignores you. It's also one of the signs of a profoundly selfish personality and a possibility that you might look up some of the symptoms and signs of a narcissistic personality. During the ceremony, he said, because so far he's just not paying any attention to you. During the ceremony, he said he was recording the ceremony, but at the end of the ceremony, he told me that nothing was recorded, so he just stood the whole time for no reason at all. And that at the ceremony, there was a single mother who sends him emails containing pictures of our son and her son because they like to play together. But I've given her my email address as well, and still she communicates with him by email and Facebook. See, this isn't normal when this guy communicates with nothing but women, and these women exclude you, and he doesn't share all of this when you're not included in this. I mean, there are lots of women who communicate with me too, but my wife is aware of all of it. He seemed uncomfortable around her that evening. She was at the table I was sitting at. In addition, he took a 5-day vacation with some friends from work to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, on a golfing trip 3 weeks ago. And one of these was a golfing buddy at work who is a woman that he golfs with. Now see, when his golfing buddy is a woman, This again is a little unusual. He assured me that he was not going, but that she had wanted to be included on the trip. I made it clear that I was not okay with that, but he told her that I was cool with it, but that the other wives were not. See, if he's taking golfing vacations with a female coworker and you told him that you were not cool with it, this is a profound disregard for your feelings. And some serious conversations need to happen between the two of you. And if you're not having these serious conversations, as in, you can't do this, and he's going anyway, something is really seriously wrong. Like as in, you need to go to counseling. This is what I meant by a narcissistic personality. These are the kind of people who just pretty much say, I don't care. I don't care what you feel. I don't care if you're scared. I don't care if it bothers you. Too bad. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. This kind of guy will end up cheating if he's not already. I'd be surprised from what you tell me. By the way, we've not had, so you tell me you've been married for I think 5 years. I may have it wrong. We've not had a family vacation yet in all these years, and I asked him not to do these kind of trips without taking care of our family first, and yet you still haven't had one. So at some point, darling, it sounds like you tolerate being ignored. At some point, you have to put a family vacation on the schedule. At some point, you lock the front door and you say, we're going to sit down with the schedule book and put the family vacation on the schedule. You say, no, you're not going to Myrtle Beach. We're going to schedule a family vacation. You know, with guys who are this selfish, in many cases, they behave like children and continue to do behaviors that are unacceptable because somebody let them. So it may have been his spoiled parents before this, or his parents who spoiled him, but now it's you. This is behavior that in a partnership is not okay. And at some point, as a partner, you have to say, no, you don't go to Myrtle Beach on a golf vacation when we haven't had a family vacation. You don't just go, well, okay, yeah, why don't you go with your female golfing buddy and we'll just wait on our family vacation for another 20 years. You don't. You just don't do it. It doesn't help that our finances are still not combined. Why is this not a surprise? We have separate banking accounts. And then he says this is how his parents do it. Well, that's hardly any surprise either. I mean, his parents have raised him to be like he is, completely self-centered and do whatever he feels like it. And it doesn't matter what his parents do. His parents are irrelevant. You tell him what you want. Now, you can't make him do it, but you tell him what you would like to have done. When people have separate finances, that's usually because they're on their way to preparing for divorce. And I see people do this right from the day that they're married. You said, I can't tell him what to do with his money. He can do whatever he wants as long as the bills get paid, is what he's told me. Yes, he can do whatever he wants, but look at his words. He can do what he wants. Everything in your marriage so far that you're describing is what he wants. So he's really not married. What he is he does whatever he feels like, and then he has you to come home to take care of him. So you're kind of like his nanny. He's a little boy, and he comes home, and you take care of him. And you let that happen. So at what point are you going to say no? So far, this is pretty sick. And then you described some things that you tried to correct with the money. You described that you're a graduate student right now, but you used to make money. And then he says that, well, when you graduate from graduate school, then things will change. No, things won't change because he's been selfish like this your entire marriage. And then he'll come up with another excuse to keep your finances separate because they always have been. So in a partnership, you make joint decisions, and everything you're describing here is not a joint decision. He makes the decision, and then you just live with it. Now, that doesn't mean that you be snotty about it. You don't stand up in your hind legs and you start, screaming and being antagonistic and contentious and angry. But you can say, what we're doing here is unacceptable. This is not a partnership, and so we're not going to continue down this road. And some people would say, well, you can't just say no. Yeah, actually you can. Just like you can say, no, you can't have an affair. You can do that. You can say to your partner, I'm not willing to live with you having an affair. You can also say, I'm not willing to live in an environment where you make all your own decisions and we don't function as a partnership. So let's look at some of the options instead. If we're going to be married, then we have to function like we're married instead of you doing whatever you feel like. His need to get attention, you said, from other women started when we were dating within the first year, I imagine. I remember sitting on his lap and crying about it. The separate money issue also started before we got married. No surprise there. I really need some advice here. And then you kind of go on describing some other issues. But sweetie, at some point, he's not going to lead out and make these changes. He's not going to do it. So you have to be willing to tell him what a marriage looks like. He clearly does not know. And so you may have to teach him some of the principles from Real Love and Marriage. Read it thoroughly yourself. Talk to him about your own flaws and mistakes. Don't point this out as though he were somehow a villain. You describe to him what a marriage looks like, a loving marriage. Tell him how you have fallen short as a partner. Describe to him the mistakes you have made, and then say, this is what I would like to work toward. Here are some of the characteristics that I'd like to work toward. And ask him what he'd be willing to do. But you continue on this vein, and you're going to be alone for the rest of your life. So that's a start, and then you see where it goes from there. And then I recommend that you get on the website and participate in the conference calls and get a whole lot of love and support from people who have experience with marriages and with relationships so that you can get some more help, because this is going to take a whole lot more than a single answer in a video chat. Here's a viewer who says, I was just wondering, do you think that ultimately the only therapy that works is real love? Well, the answer to that is no. I mean, I can tell you that real love is the unconditional love, which, I didn't invent unconditional love. Real love is just a term that describes a system of principles that is extraordinarily effective if people will live by them. And I describe it only because I've seen it be consistently effective. Is it the only thing that works? In the end, everything that I've seen work involves some form of unconditional love. That doesn't mean people have to use this particular set of values or principles. Heavens no. But I've never seen people become truly happy until they feel loved. No, I haven't. That doesn't mean that other things don't become involved. Many people require, for example, the assistance of some, for example, recovery programs. In addition, many people require the assistance of occasional psychiatric visits or pharmaceutical help, medications. So may require the help of a lot of things. They may require drug rehab. It may require help from a lot of different things. But in the end, can people feel happy without feeling unconditionally loved? I've never seen it. There may be somebody who does. It'd be hard for me to imagine. But it doesn't have to be under the title real love by any means, because there are many, many people who have felt profoundly happy. Never heard of real love. You continue. I was listening to a previous video chat this morning, and you talk about what might be the way to respond to somebody who says something like, I want to die. And you talked about when somebody says this, people tend to rush in and say things like, you shouldn't say that, or why are you feeling like that, or try to talk people out of how they're feeling. And you said what's really needed is for somebody to really hear that person, or say, well, there must be a reason you feel like that. And I had the experience recently of phoning a friend and saying something like, I feel like I don't matter, or if I died, nobody would notice. And he responded to me in just the way that you suggested, even though he didn't know the principles of real love. And you're right, it really does help. The main reason a person would feel suicidal is that nobody cares anything about them. By the time I finished talking to this friend, I felt a whole lot better. And it does make me wonder about a lot of the therapies that I've experienced that have never really seemed to help me. Whereas when I felt loved, it made a big difference. So I guess increasingly when I ask myself whether I want to participate in things or go to seminars or talks or retreats or therapy groups, I find myself asking, will I feel more loved at the end of them? And I wonder sometimes whether at times my so-called therapy prior to coming to real love has at times done me more harm than good. Well, and I asked the same questions, which is why I ended up writing books about real love, is that, I participated in a lot of different therapy things and, as you said, seminars, talks, retreats, therapy groups, and so on. And I heard a lot of talk, and I heard a lot of analysis, and a lot of jabber, and a lot of it did seem to go nowhere until I began to feel the sensation of being unconditionally loved. It's that power that transforms people rather than just being analyzed and advised and manipulated and tricked and being given techniques which, really in the end just don't seem to matter much. I agree with that. Here's somebody who says, a first cousin of mine passed away last week. His nephew handled the arrangements. His request through his mom to me was that no family attend the services. I haven't seen this cousin who passed away in 23 years, and the cousin who buried him I've only seen here and there. His mom told me yesterday that he's upset that no one called or came by. How should I approach him? I'd like to offer my regards, but I'm a little hesitant knowing that he's angry. It's a little confusing. Nobody was to attend the services, but he was angry that no one called or came by. Well, when people are angry, they're always angry for the same reason, aren't they? And I've had people in my family and elsewhere be angry over the most confusing things. And if you'd, like you just said, you'd like to offer your regards, so do it. You go, now the best thing to do is in person if you can, but on the phone if you can't. And I've had the experience of talking to people who are furious for nonsensical reasons, reasons that defy description. And so you call them up, you visit them, and it's like no matter which way you do it, they're going to be mad. Have you ever been in those situations? No matter what you do, it's going to be too much or it's going to be too little. It's going to be too high or too low, too black, too white, something. And so I choose to try to do the loving thing. So that's what I do. You call up and you say, hello, this is Fred, and I've called just to see how you're doing. What most people do is they call and say, oh, gee, I'm so sorry to hear don't dwell on that. Don't dwell on the death. Call to see how that angry person's doing. I called to see how you're doing through all of this. Is there anything I can do for you? I called to see how you are feeling. And because that's what he really wants to do. An angry person wants to talk about who? An angry person doesn't want to talk about the dead person. Who does the angry person want to talk about? He wants to talk about himself. And now you have to remember that you're making this call as an unconditional gift. If you're not ready for this, don't make the call. So you're calling ready to take whatever comes at you. This is an empty, angry, drowning person. And so how do drowning people behave? Drowning people behave insanely. So when you make this call, you already got it in your head. He's drowning and he's going to splash me. So if you call a drowning person and you get wet, you ain't going to be surprised, are you? So you say, so I called to see how you're doing. And he goes, well, nobody came to the funeral. And you say, well, that must feel pretty terrible. Well, yeah, it sure does. I'm just mad about it. And he vents, and you say, now, the reason I came was that I didn't come was I understood that from Aunt or Cousin Bob, I understood that nobody was to come, but maybe I got that wrong. Maybe that was a miscommunication. If so, I feel terrible about that. What can I do? You must feel left all alone. And let this guy say, I just feel all left alone and blah, 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 blah. And you say, what would you like me to do? If you're in town, you say, would you like me to come over? Talk about it. You offer this angry man whatever he'd like to do. Talk about it some more, have you come over, scream at you. But what you're going to do is remain calm and peaceful and loving and offer whatever he wants, and you're not going to defend yourself other than once to explain why you weren't there so that he knows. And then that's it. But don't stay away from him, because if you stay away from him, he's going to turn that into the worst possible reason and carry that around for the next 20 years and load it in his gun as a bullet and shoot you and everybody else and himself with it 100 times. So just because somebody else is hateful doesn't mean that, you need to react to their hate. Love them anyway. And bless your heart for trying. Because I've been there and done it. It can be just miserable. Here's a viewer who says, a guy friend just sent me a text asking if he could crash on my couch tonight. From what he says, there are no rooms available in the city due to a convention. Just as some background information, this guy and I years ago had a sexual relationship filled with lots of other trading. Since then, I've learned to have a platonic relationship with him, non-sexual, and have expressed to him that I'm learning how to be a more loving person and therefore do not engage in the same types of activities that he associates with me. Even though I've said this, he still tries his luck to see, I suppose, if I'm really serious about this stuff. When he realizes that I am serious, he backs off and is able to simply enjoy my company. I don't doubt that there probably aren't any rooms available in the city, and I would honestly like to help him out in this situation, but I'm not quite sure what to do. I've been feeling like I'm getting sick. That's great. And really don't feel all that hospitable or want to be around anyone while I'm feeling this lousy. Oh, so you really are feeling sick. I thought it was I feel a headache coming on. My first instinct, I wasn't laughing at your being sick. My first instinct was to come up with some lie that I already have a guest staying at my house this week. I don't want to do that. I want to be loving toward him. I would like to help, but I'm just not feeling well at the moment. Do I simply tell him that? I guess I worry that he'll be disappointed and not like me anymore. Very telling of where I am right now. So listen carefully. You get to tell him whatever you want. So here's the place I'm concerned about most. You would like to help, but listen, you've already got your answer. I would like to help, but I'm just not feeling well at the moment. If you're not feeling well, and here's a guy who's going to come over and pressure you, and then you say, you're sick and I don't feel all that hospitable, and you said, I don't want to be around anybody while I'm feeling this lousy, and then you're worried that he won't like you. You've already given your answer. You've already said, I don't want him here. That's what you've said. But you're worried that he won't like you. Well, I mean, you got to be kidding me. This guy's made no arrangements, and all of a sudden he's just, texting, going, have you got room? This guy pretty much planned to inconvenience you. If all the foreplanning this guy's made is to show up at your house at the last second, why should you feel bad? That's zero planning. So a complete lack of planning on his part, as the saying goes, does not constitute an emergency on yours. So here you are feeling not well physically, feeling inconvenienced emotionally, feeling pressured. Probably not a really great time to entertain a guest. What do you think? And you don't have to worry about whether this guy likes you or whether he's ever going to show up at your house again. So, if you were feeling in tip-top condition and you felt like you really wanted to practice being unconditionally loving with this guy, go for it. And I'm not giving you the answer. I'm not saying, do it or don't do it. I'm saying you've already given the answer here in about 5 different places. You're making it kind of obvious. So listen to your own answers, sweetie. Is it possible, says this viewer, to feel happy in some areas of your life and not in others, and still call the happy areas real? It's like this. My relationship with my husband is sad and pathetic. There's no blaming here of him or myself. It's just the way it is. The deal is, I still have fun with lots of other people, like girlfriends, my children, coworkers, and so on. And I'm just wondering how that can be. I'm dead when it comes to having fun with him. Weird. I don't know how to bring life back to our marriage, or even if I care. I miss romance, but I am learning to live without it. So is that possible? Sure. So I would say it like this. The amount of real love that we have in our lives is actually quantifiable. Now, that doesn't mean I could put a number on it in your life, but it's measurable. We have a certain amount, and it varies from literally minute to minute, depending on how filled up we are, the conversations we've had with friends, the meditating we've done, the praying, the loving acts we've shared, whether we're sick, whether we're tired. But so let's say that we have 55 units of unconditional love in our lives. I'm making this up, obviously. Don't go looking for the real love unconditional scale in the book or anywhere else. And so with those 55 units, as we interact with our, as you said, our friends, our children, our coworkers, and so on, in any given moment, they require 10 units from us, 15 units, 20 units. Oh, we're swimming. This is great. We can handle these interactions easily. In fact, we are so loving with them that often in many of these interactions, we walk away with more than we went into the interactions with. It's that great. So, yes, this is very possible that these interactions you're having with them are loving and that you're genuinely happy. Then you go home and you have 55 units of unconditional love. And you walk in the door and this great big glump of a husband, and I don't know what he's like, so there's nothing personal about it, who is a drain and grouchy and empty and afraid and attacking or a victim or whatever it is, starts in, complaining or being critical or whatever. And you go from 55 units of feeling loved to 0 in 6 seconds. That happens. So it is possible for you to have happiness everywhere else, and you go home and all of your expectations and the wounds with that person and all of that just bring it just crashing down. So the answer to your question, yeah, sure is. Now, what to do about it? You could be satisfied with that, but what a crummy way to live. I would suggest reading the Real Love and Marriage book. I would suggest going on the conference calls. I would suggest talking to a whole lot of loving people and getting some love from them so that your bucket is a lot more filled up in interacting with this person, and then attempting to be more loving with him, to see if being more loving with him can make a difference, and attempting it over quite a long period of time. Obviously, he doesn't feel loved, or you wouldn't be having a lousy time with him. And seeing if over a prolonged period of time you can make a difference. This is going to really take a prolonged effort. Usually it does. And usually for a significant period of time, you're going to feel like the Lone Ranger, devoting love to him without getting anything back at all. But continuing to live like this, yuck. You talk about how you feel dead and you miss the romance. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't get it back, because I've seen a lot of couples get it back. So it's worth a shot. Here's somebody who says, I'm a teacher, and I have a question about something you said. Is it true that if I ever get irritated with a student, that it's because I'm not feeling loved in that moment? So it has nothing to do with them. The thing is, some kids are very annoying. Yeah, it's all about you. There are kids who are loud. There are kids who are challenging. There are kids who present more opportunities to be loving, yes, but how you react is all about you. Now, that's not a criticism. It's just an indicator of where you are. Like we talked about a little bit ago, love is measurable. And so you go into the room and you have X units of love, and yes, I know there are kids. If you have 55 units, there are 70 unit kids. And so as soon as they open their mouth, poof, you're empty. But see, all that does is tell you that you don't have 70 units. Do you see? If a 70-unit child, a 70-unit needy child speaks and you empty out, all the child did was give you a piece of information. The child told you you don't have 70 units. That's all you learned. But it's not about the kid. It tells you what you didn't have. Then you continue. I feel I would have to be a saint not to get annoyed at them. I understand that anger is always wrong. However, sometimes I find it so hard not to get irritated. But see, it's hard only if you're depleted, not if you're not. Many years ago, Uh, I ran a Boy Scout troop of older boys, the boys that other, Boy Scout leaders would shoot themselves if they had. And these kids were like, graduates of reform schools. I mean, this was like 25 to 30 kids who were just disasters, who'd run off their previous Boy Scout leaders. And so there was 25 to 30 of them. We actually bought a school bus to cart them around. And there was just me. There was one Boy Scout leader for all these kids. And these kids had just destroyed other leaders. I discovered that if you loved them, they just turned into melted butter. It was all about whether you had sufficient love to handle them. So that if you had a 70-unit kid who came in, if you had a 70-unit kid and you had 80 units of love, the kid just went poof and collapsed. It was over. Whereas if you had a 70-unit kid and you only had 50 units, the kid would destroy you. So it was never about the kid. It was always about you. Every once in a while, I would have an adult volunteer who would say, well, I'll come help you. And they'd come help me for like a week. And these kids would needle this adult, or they would just do the stuff they do. And the adult would look over at me like, are you going to save me? It's just, and inside I would be thinking, you're going to have to handle this on your own. After all, the kid's 14. It's always about loving the kid. You continue. For example, there are 2 or 3 students in a particular class who have a tendency to interrupt me or call out when I'm talking. There's another one who seems unable to resist constantly drumming on the table. There's another one who can't resist making missiles out of bits of paper and trying to throw them at his classmates. And then you talk about a system, where as calmly as you can, you try to stop them from doing what they're doing, and you give them 2 warnings before there's a consequence. Now, I'm going to suggest to you, we may talk about this more, in fact, because we're not going to have time to do this all this time. We may lead with our next discussion with this one. But before you stop a kid from doing what he's doing, we forget that before we do stopping and consequences, we first need to teach a kid. And that's what we forget as parents. When a kid is talking out loud, before we tell a kid to stop it, we need to teach him. We need to say to him, so, Mr. Smith, I say to the kid, would you tell me the meaning of what it is that you're doing right now? And I'm going to talk more about that in our next session next week, because we are so busy stopping kids from doing what they're doing, we don't actually listen to them, which is why they keep doing it. They keep doing it because we're not listening. So we'll get to more of that. We forget the loving part and we go straight to the consequences part. And so the kids are going, where's the love? And if they don't feel loved, then of course they keep acting out. So these have been a hoot. Great questions. And we're going to meet again a week from tonight. In the meantime, I'm going to remember what a great time I had tonight. I look forward to seeing you all then, and between now and then, as we always do, we're going to remember that it's always about real love. And between now and then, I will have gotten to see a number of you in Dallas. So we'll see you then, and see you next week. Bye.